Good morning, oh my God. Oh my God, I've just had a urethra moment. A eureka moment. I say urethra because remember Married with Children with Kelly Bundy? You know how she was a bit dumb? In one of her episodes, instead of going Eureka, she goes urethra. So I say urethra sometimes, but or I say Ulrika from Ulrika Johnson. I'm pretending to be ditzy and funny at the same time, but anyway, I'm a dork, just shush. Anyway, so I'm sitting here listening to music, and I'm sorry, someone watching me was trying to mess with my phone. It's under investigation though, so what was I saying? Yes, so I'm sitting here listening to music, trying to think of a way to how I'm going to present this whole Amber Wilkinson School of Alchemy thing. Like, what name am I going to give it? What's the name of the movie? How am I going to present this with a catchy name? Because titles and names mean everything. They're very important. Just like the first the first spell your parents ever do are their marriage vows. Marriage is very sacred. It's a sacrosanct, occult commitment that you, where you're basically committing your souls together. So the marriage vows that you have, the dress that you wear, the bridesmaids, the matron of it's all steeped in occult practices. The rice, the flowers, throwing the rice and the flowers and all of that. There's all occult reasons as to why you do it. The veil, why the matron of honour goes first, why the bridesmaids go first, the flower girls, all of that. There's all occult significance in marriages. And the first spell that your parents cast together are the marriage vows. And then you put the wedding ring on to lock in your commitment, because in occult practices, circles stop the flow of energy. That's why I say don't use pentagrams. Like, you can use the Star of David, but don't use the Star of David if it's in a pentagram, if it's locked in a circle, because it stops the flow of energy. It actually contains it. It controls it and contains it, and stops it. It disallows it from evolving and growing and spreading. In true occult practices, instead of using a pentagram, you're supposed to use a cross here. You know, when they put Christ on the cross, which is quite poignant considering that it's Easter at the moment, you know how they put Christ on the cross? You're not really supposed to be using crucifixes and crosses, because the cross meets in the middle, it's sealed in the middle. So when they put Christ on the cross, they were trying to stop his word from spreading. They were trying to stop Christ from having power before and after his resurrection. So the people that condemned him to his execution put him on the cross, because the cross stops the power. It stops the. They were trying to, because they were the Antichrist. The people who condemned Christ to his death, they were the Antichrist. And so, like how I'm fighting the Antichrist movement now, these are all people that claim to be Christian, claim to be Jewish, claim to be all this, all that, and they have their crosses. But you will never see me with crosses. I've got a crucifix that I was given for my 50th birthday, a cross, rosary beads, but I don't use it for the cross, I use it for the wood, because the wood came from Bethlehem. And I feel close to Christ there when I touch it, because the wood actually came from palm trees from Bethlehem. But ordinarily, to practice the occult and this is where the church gets it wrong, you're not supposed to have crosses, because what it does is that it contains your faith, it contains your connection to God. It doesn't let you have an expansive, open connection to God. So people like me who know what they're doing, we don't use crosses, we use crosshairs. Like crosshair for when you're firing a gun. Because what you're doing is when you put your sights on the crosshair, it's targeted, it's pinpointed, and when like you fire off that mind bullet, when you fire off your heart, when you fire off your question to God, when you're firing off your prayer, when you're firing off that I need to speak to the Lord, I need to speak to my ancestors, it flies through the crosshair and spreads out like a magnetic bullet, that like a shotgun, how with the bullets, how the pellets spread out. It's just like that. So in occult practices, you use a crosshair, not a circle. So when you get married and you put the ring on, when you put the ring on the finger that is connected to the heart, your left hand is connected to your heart, it's saying that I'm committing to you. I will love no other. I will give myself to no other but you, and these are my sacred vows. Right? So then the second spell that your parents cast is the name that they give you when you're born, because the name that you're given seals your fate. It tells you everything you need to know about your life path, by the name that your parents give you, your birth sign, your ancestral connection to that name, blah, blah, like there's a whole thing in it. So I'm sitting here trying to get the names of everything right, thinking what I can do. And for some reason, I started thinking about the book that I wrote when I was locked up. The first book that I wrote. I've put a link in the description box below, and it's called And Then They Were Gone. And I wrote it after I had to figure out how to use bioenergetics, to heal myself from the effects of the anaphylaxis that I was going through twice a day from being force medicated. And I literally found the notes on my phone yesterday, my write-up for it, because I was documenting my medical side effects as well as the effects of the frequencies that I was having to use, because I couldn't use my phone because Chris lied and said I was making up some bullshit. So they took my phone off me. But when in actual fact it's because they knew that I was trying to reach out to the New Zealand High Commission and all that, and the tribunal for the Treaty of Waitangi, to say the British are torturing me because I'm Māori, I need your help. So they took my phone off me. And because because he was watching my Instagram, he saw me having a conversation with my sister about how I was catching him wearing ladies' underwear, ladies' lingerie. And then a couple of hours later, my phone got taken off me, and I said to my sister, that's how I know he was listening in. Because what they said was that Chris was saying that I was saying things about him that were upsetting my children, but it was literally a private conversation my children would have known nothing about. So anyway, when I was having to heal myself, because by this point my scars from my hernia surgeries were starting to get infected, and they were getting raw and itchy, and they hadn't quite split open yet, but they weren't far away from splitting open and then getting infected, and I was slowly rotting. And so I was documenting everything. I found the notes on my phone yesterday, and then what I did was, because what I was doing was working, I wrote a story called And Then They Were Gone. And because they took my phone off me, I had no way to record the story. So I wrote it all out by hand. And I used to read these stories to some of the girls. They loved my stories. And I used to put posies in that in their room to help them with their nightmares, and they were able to go off their sleep medication and that sort of thing. I was using my greenstone in their room like a pendulum and cleansing their rooms and the hallways and that, because there were murders and suicides that took place in those rooms and in those hallways and that these sensitive girls that were being called crazy were picking up on and seeing, and letting the doctors think that they were crazy, when in actual fact they were just very tuned in, highly gifted women. I know for a fact one of them was a writer. And I gave her the idea to write a book about a little girl and a unicorn. And so I would write my stories. And then they were gone, and with a little help from my friends that I wrote when I was locked up, and they would come and say, "Have you written any more? Have you written any more?" Or when I'd written stuff, I'd say, "I've written some," and then we'd all gather like in the little alcove bit of the hallways and stuff, and I'd read them the next chapters. And I know Gillian, I loved her so much. She'd come and say, "Have you written any more? Can you read me some more?" I'd read the Bible at her door. Do you know they put her in a mental institution simply for the fact she was grieving for the loss of her husband, David. Her family didn't want to deal with her. She was too sad. She was depressed. So they classified her grief for the death of her husband as a mental illness. And then one day she completely vanished. She was there 1 minute, gone the next, and they'd snuck her out in the middle of the night to an old people's home. We never got to say goodbye. We never found out nothing. Absolutely outrageous. That place needs to be shut down. They're criminal. They're an evil practice. I loved her. I used to protect her from the aggressive ones in there. The one that was racist to me, I know her name was Sarah. She was horribly racist. She used to target me every day with racial abuse. "What are you doing here? Immigrant, blah, blah, blah. Why are you walking around with bare feet all the time?" "Because I'm Indigenous, I don't wear shoes." Yeah, so, but Gillian was scared of her. So my stories and that used to help her. And she'd say to me, "Can you come and read the Bible?" Because I was becoming ordained as a reverend. So I was learning the Bible. And she believed in God. She had faith. And so I'd stand at her door and read the Bible to her and that. And she loved my stories, and and then they were gone. Because it helped these girls understand these things that were happening in their rooms in the hallway. So I found the notes and everything. And then because I've been thinking, with all the genres of movies that I'm doing, I've got an Exorcist one. I've got, like an occult one that's like, to do with witches and devil worshipping. I've got all sorts. Dracula, werewolf, all that. But I haven't done a ghost one. And I was thinking about this the other day. I really need to do one that's like a paranormal one that's to do with ghosts, kind of like The Ring sort of thing. And I'm sitting there listening to the music, trying to be inspired with the whole Amber Wilkinson is about to take on Harry Potter thing. And it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. And then they were gone. And it's already been written. It's literally already been written. I just need to turn it into a screenplay. I need a screenwriter. And then they were gone is based on real events. It's based on a little girl called B. There's only one thing in it that never happened, but it's because I'm pretty sure I've picked up on an unsolved murder while I was writing it. Well, manslaughter. A man hit on his bike while he was out riding his bike. But anyway, it's the story of a little girl called B. B-E-A. Her name's Beatrice. But they call her B for short, but it's because my name, Debbie, means bee in Hebrew. Depending on your interpretations, it can mean queen bee or honey bee as well, but bee, right? So it's a story of a little girl called Bee whose grandmother gets sick and goes to hospital. And she's dreading having to go to the hospital because hospitals are like, she sees dead people there. And contrary to what anybody else will tell you, hospitals are the only place in the world where the living meet the dead. It's like the veil between the living and the dead. And it's the only place where you'll see the dead wandering, where you'll be able to communicate with them, because some people in hospitals, they haven't died yet, so they're in the between worlds. Not quite in the afterlife, not quite in the forelife. So they're in between, or they've newly crossed over, or they died unexpectedly, violently, suddenly, and they don't understand what the hell's happened, because they never had time to prepare for their deaths, because that does happen. And so they wander the halls of hospitals and that, and I hate hospitals. I hate them with every fibre of my being, because it's the only place on the planet where the living and the dead converge. And when the dead know that you know they're there, they don't leave you alone. And I'm never left alone. When I went in to have my first hernia surgery, I was plagued in Scotland, at that hospital in Scotland, plagued. And then also I was getting woken up from morphine. I was on a morphine drip, and the nurses and that were wanting me to do readings for them. Well, so I'm like out of on morphine, having just had surgery, life-saving surgery, and here I am doing readings for all the nurses, and that. It's not their fault. It's just when nurses believe in that sort of thing. They understand the afterlife, and some doctors as well, the genuine ones. And many years ago, I got approached by some doctors who were writing a book about life after death, and because they were seeing spirits leaving the body when they were operating on people, and they asked me if I would promote their book, but I turned it down because the stuff they were writing about wasn't true. It was they were misunderstanding everything. And I had to say no, because I said, like, I'd have to help you rewrite the book in order to get the facts straight, and I don't want to take away from your experience, sort of thing. So yeah, that's why I hate hospitals. So it's a story about B, and her nana gets sick, so she has to go to the hospital to see her nana, and talking about all the things that she's experiencing going to the hospital and being at the hospital, but all the events in it happened in real life, either in my life, in cases that I've worked on, because parents would come to me from my blog days and say, that my kid is experiencing this, my kid is experiencing that, which was the whole reason why I started my blog in the first place. Remember, I talked about Chip Coffee Cup and that show that he made that was just abhorrent to me, to the point of me feeling the need to want to do this blog. And so these parents would come to me and say, my kid's experiencing this, that. And so I wrote some of their experiences into the story. And then once I wrote it, and it was basically then where the Grand Empress Fairy Godmother, Brehena Saithusa, but in the rewriting, I'm probably going to have to, I don't know, in the rewriting of the movie, see, the Brothers Grimm, they took stories like Snow White and, like all the Disney movies. If you knew the origin stories of these Disney movies, you'd be horrified at the truth of some of them, like Hansel and Gretel and Snow White and Cinderella and Pinocchio and that. If you knew the original stories to a lot of these kid stories, you'd be horrified. Mine's going to be the flip reverse. So we're going to have the Mary the Fairy version, which is for kids, which is just going to be a cute little kid's fairy tale. But it needs to be rewritten, because when I introduced the BFG, the biorhythmic field generator, into the storyline, which is what I used to help heal my tummy, help with the anaphylaxis and pain, it was something that required batteries. But then later on I thought, well, if I'm out making my shows out in the world and I don't have access to batteries and that, what the hell am I going to do? And came Nikola Tesla, and came the pyramids of Giza, all of that, and came Hoth and Chonsu, my Egyptian gods and that, and they helped me fix it all. So now the BFG, the biorhythmic field generator, is 100% organic, doesn't require batteries, can be put inside children's night lights and lamps and that, and you turn the frequency up and down. You tune things like kind of like a combination lock, but not really, but sort of energetically, but not really, energetically, but not physically. You alter it depending on what you need it for. I will be the only one that has the BFG, and what I put into the lamps and night lights and all of that will be an altered version that will require to be plugged in, or batteries within the home, because I wouldn't trust people with the blueprint, like with the actual one. When I'm dead and buried, my daughter, if I have a daughter, she can use it. Otherwise, it'll go in my occult museum. But yeah, so it needs to be slightly rewritten. But it hit me like a bolt out of the blue. My ghost movie, and then they were gone. So B's going to go to the hospital. It starts with her seeing a plane crash, and it's based on a situation when I was growing up in Levin. Back home, I went to Fairfield Primary School in Levin, and one of my teachers there, her fiance died in a really famous New Zealand plane crash. And she used to get me to read her palm in the playground and do readings for her when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. I think I went there when I was 7, right up until it was time to go to intermediate at like 9, 10 years old. And she used to get me to read her palm and do readings for her, some of the other teachers as well, to the point where they used to let me sit in the teacher's lounge and in the principal's office. I got like special treatment because I was doing readings for everyone. But when I used to read her palm, as soon as I touched her, I saw the plane crash that her fiance died in. Mount, oh, I'll put a link. It was like in 1979 or something, this plane crash. And so I wrote that into the story with, the spirits, and they're asking for her help. And, because like I used to, I wrote it in The Porcelain Rabbit as well. The very first book I ever wrote that I used to read out to Martin and my boys on the phone, The Porcelain Rabbit. Going for a walk, walking past the cemetery, and the man standing there trying to find his headstone. The same thing happened in Liverpool. Chris was there with me. There's a cemetery, famous cemetery in Liverpool. We went for a walk through the cemetery because I love going for walks in cemeteries, especially in Britain. And the one in Sheffield, oh my God, that's just to die for. It's all overgrown and beautiful, and yeah, all these old cemeteries in Great Britain. Some of them are just breathtakingly beautiful, especially the ones that are in nature. And the one in Liverpool, there was a lot of, well, undead, a lot of them. And it's not that they don't haunt the cemeteries. They know you're coming and they know you can help them. So they'll pop up and say, hey, look. And what it was they were trying to find their headstones had been removed from their graves. And they were trying to put their headstones back on their graves. Some of them in this Liverpool cemetery were like lined up against the wall. Some of them they used to pave the footpaths and that, and it's really disrespectful to remove someone's name from their place of death, their burial spot, because it erases them from history. It starts to remove their memory from history, and the worst thing that can happen to someone who's alive is being forgotten when they're dead. It's a lot of the reasons why some of them hang about, because they don't want to be forgotten, because they know that in the wrong hands they're going to be forgotten. Their memories are going to be forgotten, even if they died as children, even if they didn't have significantly important lives. The fact that their names are removed from their place of burial, it's like it's getting an eraser and erasing them from history. And it starts, they're committed to a black hole where everything gets tuned up and spit back out again. You know, it's only the rich and famous and memorable that people seem to care about their headstones, their gravestones. But if you were just like a pauper from the Victorian era and that, you know, it doesn't matter, use your headstone for a cobblestone, you know, and it's wrong. And we need to be respecting our dead. It's really important that we keep the memories of the dead alive, even if it's just as simple as getting a little plaque and putting their name on it, because then the next person who comes along that looks down and reads their name, they'll automatically, their memory is shot back up to the present from the past, and it's like a snapshot of time. They're remembered there and then, and their life lives on. The past lives on. And this is what I'm trying to teach people. This is why I'm going to have my own cemetery. Because a lot of these veterans from the George Callaghan Trust, they'll be forgotten when they die. You know, a lot of veterans, when they die without any money, they get put in paupers' graves. And if they've served their country in the military or as a first responder or in law enforcement, but they couldn't afford to be buried, they're just chucked in the ground. Some of them, they're chucked in the ground like in a pit where there's multiple of them. And now we've got these governments trying to say, well, you know, we'll grow fruit and vegetables on them and then you can eat cannibal fruits and vegetables, which is absolutely cannibalistic, vampiric, Illuminati, devil worshipping bullshit. I will just serve you up after you're dead and you can barbecue your leg on a spit. That's how you know we're living in on the dark side of the world, because we've got supermarkets selling people's limbs as meat to put on a barbecue, and I'm not even joking. And so because I am a high priestess and it is my job to teach people about the afterlife and rebirth and all of that sort of thing, you know, with the George Callaghan Trust, I want to keep the memory of these people alive because they were important enough to fight and almost die for our countries. So in death, they deserve our respect. So these people, the veterans that sign up to the George Callaghan Trust, they'll be given free burials and headstones, and they'll be remembered, and then I'll be able to use them as part of the training for the Amber Wilkinson School. So as long as they're okay with being in movies and books and that, but and music videos probably with some of these kids. So and then they were gone. Tells a story about me and other kids that I've had to help in the past having experiences they didn't want to have in hospitals. Don't believe what anyone tells you when they say that there's portals between life and death and this hunting lodge and that castle and this blah. It's not true. Hospitals are the only place where the living and the dead converge. Because the dead aren't allowed to just access the living. There's rules and protocols even for the dead and dying. And it takes, you have to defy the laws of physics and tear open the fabric of time. If you're from the past and you want to interact with the present or the future, you have to bend physics and tear open the fabric of time and generate enough electromagnetic force in order to be able to project your image to the living, like in a time slip or not a time bend. Not really, because that's recorded. That's already pre-recorded and just played back like a videotape. But with a time slip in there, if you want to interact with the living, you have to mess with the fabric of time. And it takes, you have to draw on a lot of energy. So, you know, these people, oh, I talk to the dead and stuff like that. Well, you know, did the lights go out? Did they flicker? Did light bulbs blow? Did you hear clicking, clacking? Did your hair stand on end? Because like when you're dealing with electromagnetics, which is, this is all to do with my biorhythmic field generator, you see the physical effects of it before you see the dead. So these people that say, oh, you know, I can see dead everywhere and blah, blah, and they're just randomly talking about the dead, it's all bullshit. It is scientifically incorrect. Which is one of the reasons why my students all started coming after me, because they wanted to go out on their own and try and be me, to sell incorrect information to people, and I wasn't going to have my name on that, because I'm held responsible, because I was supposed to be their teacher. However, they refused to learn, so now it's all coming back on them, not me. Like, they'll pay for it in the courts. They'll lose their houses and everything because they'll have to pay me for lying in order to try and get away with pretending to be me and know more than me. You never know more than the teacher. I'm a master. I graduated. They didn't. They didn't even do the courses. They didn't even do the classes. You know those telepathy tests that I was doing up, where I was saying, I'm seeing a colour, I'm hearing a sound, a smell. They weren't even doing those. And that's like literally the first test you have when you become a student, and they weren't even doing those. And yet they were trying to sell themselves off to the world like they were Harry Potter. So, when in actual fact, they're devil worshippers. That's exactly what they are. They're a cult. And if you're a cult, you're a devil worshipper, because an alchemist and a sorcerer and a sorceress and a high priest or high priestess, we stand on our own 2 feet. We are the masters. We're the guides. We're the leaders. We use our sage knowledge and our seer foresight, our seer wisdom and our sage knowledge, because a sage is somebody who knows how to use energy to clear energy. You know, that's why you sage the house, why you use sage on the house, because you're a sage, and you can transmute energy from negative to positive, and you can use sage. But a real sage doesn't need to use sage. And a seer is somebody who uses their experience and their hierarchical knowledge in order to be able to guide people through their challenges and their ascensions, because they know what's coming, because they see what's coming, because of past experiences. It's got nothing to do with being psychic or clairvoyant, and everything to do with wisdom. That's why in the archetypal representation of a sage, you'll see them with one eye, or with one clear eye and one milky eye, because they see beyond. They see beyond the physical. They'll see beyond situations and know what's coming because of their past experience. Like, I'll just say, for example, I'll just give you a hypothetical. You know, when I talk about stuff that's going on with Donald Trump and Keir Starmer and all that, I don't just see the future, like I don't just see it coming. I also see it based on based on being a seer, because as an oracle, we can predict forecasts and outcomes based on historical events, based on karmic lessons from history, based on events that have happened in the past, where it's like, well, of course this was going to happen because it's happened before. You know, that's a seer. It has nothing to do with being psychic. I'm a seer, I'm a sage, I'm an oracle, I'm a high priestess, I'm an alchemist, I'm an elemental alchemist, I'm a sorceress, I'm the 8th element, birth. You know, I wear many hats in the occult realms, but I ain't a wizard, and I'm not a witch. And I'm not a shaman, and I'm not a, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with shamans as long as you don't sacrifice life. I'm certainly not a witch doctor. I'm not a devil worshipper. I work for the Lord. And the thing is, you can only access my kind of ability when you have an ascension. You can't have my level of knowledge and power if you aren't a servant of the Lord. You have to access the God frequency, which is like the atomic force inside every atom in the universe. And you can't be low vibrational. It's like a cannonball thinking it can be held by a cloud. It's not possible. Absolutely not possible. So them trying to be me is like a cannonball thinking that it will be held by God's cloud. And God's like, hell no. Go back down. Gravity. Leave a dent. Leave a crater. Because you're underworld. You're in the realms of, God isn't going to grant those people the ability to have access to the God particle, and they know it. That's why they resort to having to make offerings to like Baphomet and Baal and Molech. Use my body, sell my body, use, the transference of body fluids, whether it be menstrual blood, semen, vaginal fluids, spit, urine, fecal matter. Chris, it was fecal matter and semen, blood sacrifices, that sort of thing. Chris even sells the ceremonial sacrificial daggers on his eBay. Graveyard soil, graveyard dirt. I know they use graveyard dirt. So they're resorting to having to appeal to people like Odin, underworld. But you still need permission to have access from Odin as well. And I know for a fact with Chris and Martin and Donald Trump and like Musk and that, Odin has denied them. So then you go to Hades, and after Hades, who's like death and destruction and that, then it's Lucifer and, Satan. But when you get to the point of Satan, that's when your karma is being paid back to you. When you're getting to the point where you're doing such low vibrational things that you're in the presence of Satan, it means that he's coming to collect his debt, and you will no longer have access to the light anyway. But unless you're in a cult, most of us don't know where we stand between heaven and hell or God and Satan until after we die and we have our day of judgment, which is why it's so important that the dead are remembered with headstones and memorials and that, because to not be remembered can slowly start erasing them from history, and they basically get turned into the material energetically that helps generate the force of a black hole. It's a descension, because memory descends as well as the physical body, as well as your actions, because we live in a bubble inside a bubble, and that fluctuates between the dark and the light. And all of our individual contributions decide the level of energy that fluctuates between the two worlds, like Quantum Menace in the Battle of Two Worlds. We have the light side and the dark side, just like the moon. The light side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, it's all the same thing. And all of our actions and reactions decide how high the frequency or how low the frequency. And when the frequency is low, like when the dead are wandering, trying to find their memory in cemeteries and graveyards and that, it pulls them down. And the lower you get pulled down from a gravitational momentum perspective when it comes to the forward moving motion of magnetism, when it comes to the evolutionary universe, which atoms are 100% responsible for, and the consciousness inside that atom then decides the fate of what you're going to become. When that's too low, it starts to descend, and then they get sucked into darkness. And so you'll see them, they'll pop up when you go to a cemetery or a graveyard. And that's what happened to me when I was a kid. And I wrote that into the Porcelain Rabbit. And this is a lot of what's been written in, and then they were gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'll write the children's version, which still needs to be rewritten because of the BFG that Brehennis comes down and teaches B how to use. The movie version is going to be something quite different, just like with the Brothers Grimm stories that Disney messed around with. Like in Cinderella, the stepmother, when Cinderella's freed and marries her prince, and that the stepmother is, they condemn her to death by forcing her to dance in metal shoes that are on fire. You know, they put the metal shoes in the fire so that they're red hot, and then they put the stepmother of Cinderella in the shoes and make her dance until she dies. But that's not in the Disney movie. And Peter Pan, he murders children, like Epstein Island. He lures children to their deaths, lures these boys and that to their deaths. And the truth of the matter is, there seems to be a hypothesis that Captain Hook is actually trying to save the children from Peter Pan. But Disney messed with it. So this is going to be the other way around. It's a children's story that we're going to turn into a horror movie, where the children will have the original version, but the adults will have a completely different version. And I just keep thinking Salem would be perfect to record that movie. Because I've been to Salem. And it would be perfect. But, yeah. So, and then they were gone is going to be a horror movie. Just like The Music Box. The Music Box was a story that I told about a situation that happened between me and my dad after my sister died. And I turned that into a horror movie as well. Just a little short animated one. To play on my streaming, because I'm going to have movies and animations and that come out only for Halloween. You won't be able to hear them any other time other than Halloween. So yeah, The Music Box is one of those ones. It's also going to feature in my haunted house one Halloween. So, and then they were gone. Yeah, based on real events, other than the man with the bike. So I'm pretty sure that was, I was picking up on a man who died as a result of a hit and run. And he's wanting people to know the truth about his death. So then this is probably one of the very few instances where we'll use maybe CGI. I'm okay with blue screens and green screens for things. Or, if we can work with the camera to do like lighting and that of special effects and that, I don't know. How did they do it when they made Ghostbusters and all that? I don't know, but my director's going to have to be like epic. He's going to have to be kind of that Tim Burton darkness sort of. Yeah, my director's going to have to be very creative and imaginative, and yeah. So I've put a link in the description box. You'll hear me. It sounds weird because my phone was taken off me. It was my blonde angel BJ was recording it on her old phone as I was reading it out over the payphone. And it's the first story I wrote when I was locked up. because writing kept me focused. It kept me focused on what they were all going to pay for once I got out. They were going to pay for me to turn these into books and stories and movies. So keep focused on the light at the end of the tunnel, because when you get out of it, they're all going to pay dearly for what they've done. And then you'll take that money and turn it into books and movies and build your art school. Every single one of them. So, yeah, and then they were gone. My ghost movie was sitting right there, just like my Frankenstein movie was sitting right there. Pretty awesome, eh? So, there we go. There's another one. Tick. I'll speak to you later. Ka kite anō. Mwah.